Tov. Today's daf yomi is Bava Basra daf Chav Zayin, Bava Basra 27. We're going to dedicate the daf for Shmira for the Chayalim, Hatzah for the Shuyim, and Yeshua for Am Yisrael on this eighth Tzara. We're going to start on Chafav Hamabeid around 10 lines from the bottom. It says Ula Amar Ula Ilan Asamach Meitzar B'toch Sheshes Rayam Magazon, a tree that's next to the border, within the first 16 amos of the border, is considered a thief, in that it's drawing its nourishment from the other person's property. And so therefore, Rashi says, you don't need to bring bikurim from it, because bikurim is the first fruits, needs to be brought from your field. And since it's being nourished by the other person's field, you don't need to bring bikurim. Gemara says, where does Ula know this halacha from? Ilema, maybe you want to say it comes from the Mishnah, halacha about Shvius. Now we know that the sabbatical year, you're not allowed to work the land, but there's also an inyan of Tosefes Shvius, that you're not allowed to work the land in the 6th year if it's for the purpose of being able to work the land on the 7th year. But there's halacha Moshe Sinai that you're allowed to work the land around young trees, because that's not for the 7th year. That's just to support those trees even in the 6th year. So if there be trees, there are 10 saplings in a field the size of a base sasayim, if there be trees in a field that's a base saw, which is 50 by 50, a base satayim is 50 by 100 for the Mishkan, then you can plow the whole field. So our Mishnah says, Eser netiyos hamefuzaros betoch beis saw. Let's say there are 10 saplings that are scattered over a field the size of a beis saw, which is 50 by 50. Chorshin kol beis saw. Then you're allowed to plow the whole area, bishvilon ad Rosh Hashanah, until Rosh Hashanah. And ask the Gemara, Kama havilahu, how much is the space of this? It's train alfin v'chamesh mea garmidi, kol chad v'chad. Matila, masan v'chamishin. So we say that how much is this? Rashi says if you take each strip of land and you divide into 50 strips and you lay them down, then you're going to get to 2,500 amos long, which comes out that each one is going to have 250 amos. So halo ave de ula, and then this is actually not going to be the amount of ula. That ula size is going to be greater, because ula is saying, as I'm following Rashi's explanation, that a tree nourishes 16 amos for each direction. So therefore, a tree is going to be 32 by 32. And then if you make one strip of an amma wide, just like you did for the base saw, then it's going to, and then 32 amos long, you're going to get to 1,024 amos, because there's 32 strips and each one is 32 amos. And ula size is going to be greater than the size of the Mishnah. And so therefore, what are we going to do? That can't be the source for the statement of Ula. Ela miditanan, so it comes from the following Mishnah from Shavuos. And let's say you're not looking at saplings, but you're looking at regular sized trees. Shlosha b'nei adam. You have 3 trees and trees we know are getting more nourishment than saplings take. So if they're spread out of a field that's a base saw, even though they don't belong to one person, but they belong to 3 different people, you're allowed to plow the whole field until the holiday of Shavuos. And so otherwise you can just plow around each tree. So here we say in the Mishnah, and you're allowed to plow the whole field on its behalf. So how much is that? It's again trei alfei v'heimeya. It's again 2,500 amos if you take the strips and you lay them down lengthwise. Trei alfei v'heimeya garmidi l'kol chad v'chad. Mati lehu mati leitamne me'at utlasa tilta. So then, if you divide the 2,500 by 3, you're going to get 833 and a third. And so therefore, akati nefishale de ula, we're going to see that the trees in this case are still being nourished by more than Ula, because according to Ula, it's going to get 1,024 square amos, and here we're going to get to this number is 833, and to Ula's is still greater. So the Gemara says, Lo duck, Ula is not being precise. Ula was imprecise. The Gemara says, but yeah, you can say that Ula would be imprecise, or an Amora would be imprecise if it would be for a stringency. But in here, Ula is going to be for leniency, because he's saying you don't have to bring the Bikurim as long as it's nourishing. And if he's giving a greater amount than our Mishnah, then he's being imprecise to be lenient, and that is not okay. Amar da amrinan lodak l'chumra l'kula lodak ni'amrinan. Then we could say Ula is being imprecise to be strict, but to be lenient, would we be able to say it? Gemara says no. Mi savris biribua kamrinan. Do we think when we said Ula is getting 16 amos in each direction, you thought we're talking about a square? No, we're talking about a circle. Bi'igula kamrinan. We're talking about the area of a circle. He's saying you draw it in a circle, not in a square. And there we'll see that you're going to deduct a quarter from it. Michte kama mruba yoser ala eagle. Revia, how much is a square? The area of a square is how much greater than the area of the circle that's inside the square? That's 1/4. Pashu sheva mea ushitin utamanya. So there, if we deduct from the 1,024 a quarter, we're going to be left with 768, which is actually much closer. Dakati pashe lay, and so still under these circumstances, palga da amta, because there's still going to remain a half an amma between the amount that was explicit in the Mishnah and the amount of Ula, because according to Ula, the tree is going to be nourished by 16 amos in every direction of the circle, which comes out to 768 amos. But according to the amount in the Mishnah, it was 16 and a half amos in every direction, which is 833 and a third. So that, and Gemara says, well, that's what we mean when we say Ula was not precise, because he's being more stringent. He says if it's 16 amos, you don't have to bring the Bikurim, but if it's 16 and a half, you have to. So now the Gemara has established that this Mishnah is the source for Ula's statement. But now we want to know if the law is like Ula, because we have other Mishnahs that seem to contradict what Ula says. Tashma, we come and learn from the Mishnah in Bikurim, because the Mishnah in Bikurim says, Kana Shnei Ilanos. Excuse me. Tashma, Kona Ilan Vikarko. Somebody who acquires a tree and it's real estate around it. Maybe Vikura, you bring the Bikurim and you recite the Bikurim passage. Doesn't that mean, Kolshu, that even if there's any amount that you purchased, and so we see from here that you don't require the 16 amos. Gemara says no, that's the Yud Vav Amma, that it's the, if you buy the land with the 16 amos, then you bring the Bikurim. Another attempt, also from the Mishnah in Bikurim, Tashma, Kana Shnei Ilanos B'toch Shel Chavero, maybe Ve'ino Koreh. If you buy the 2 trees in your friend's property, you bring the Bikurim and you do not, and you don't read the passage. Shlosha, but if you buy 3 trees, maybe Vikora, you bring it and you recite it. Doesn't that mean a kol shu? And it's a contradiction of Ula. The Gemara says no. Hachinami Yud Vav Amma. It's again only if it's 16 amos. Another attempt to disprove Ula. Tashma, Rabbi Kiva Amar Omer Karka Kol Shu Chayav B'Pei Bikurim because of principle. Rabbi Kiva says that if you have any small amount of real estate, you're obligated to pay and Bikurim. So this is, by the way, direct contradiction to Ula, because Ula says not if it doesn't have 16 amos, you don't have to do the Bikurim. Because you know a prusbol, and you write a prusbol. In order to have a prusbol, you need to have some land. That was the halacha of the prusbol, that it's basically because it makes every property guaranteed. And so it only works if you have real estate. So v'niknin, and also v'niknin imana chasam sheino lamachres, that that the real estate can be used as kinyan chutzner to acquire movable property. So you just need a small amount, a minuscule amount to do it. So we see from here that even if there is just a small amount, we're going to say that you're obligated in Bikurim, whereas Ula said it's only for 16 amos. So the contradiction to Ula. So the Gemara says, no. What we're talking about here on top of 27b is Bechiti. We're not talking about a tree, this is talking about a little piece of wheat. And there it doesn't nourish 16 amos like a tree. And Dekanami de Katani kolshu, it says a big any amount. And so we see that's a wheat and not a tree. A tree is bigger than a kolshu. So the Gemara says another attempt to disprove. Let's say you have a tree that's partially in Israel, partially outside of Israel. Then we're going to say that the tree is going to have tevel and chulin mixed together. Tevel is untithed; it's required to be tithed, and chulin is not required to be tithed. And so, therefore, under these circumstances, what we're going to say is that you can't be tithing from another tree. That's what Rashi says in Gittin, and because maybe you're doing from the P'tur al Chiyuv, and so too you can't separate from the fruits of the tree onto another tree, which is tevel, certain tevel, because maybe you're taking it from the chulin. So it's a problem. You have to do it just on this tree independently. And the Ritva says you can do half of it from another place, or so anyway. But the point is that this is a unique tree that's the tevel and the chulin are mixed together. Tevel, chulin, muraven, zeh b'zeh. That's the position of Rebbe. Whereas Rabbi Shimon Gamliel says, "Hagadol b'chiyav chayav, hagadol b'pater pater." He says the parts of the tree that are on the land of Israel, you have to take a tithe from it, and the parts that are in outside the land of Israel, you don't. Ad kan lo pugio the mar savar yesh brera, mar savar ein brera. So they're only arguing about whether or not you can determine which part is from Israel and which part is not from Israel. That's what we're calling in this case brera. But aval gadol b'pater or divrei hakol p'tur. But if the tree would actually, if all the roots were outside of Israel, it would be exempt, even if it's standing within 16 amos of Israel. And we don't say it's nourishing from the land of Israel, and therefore you have to do truma ma'aser from it. Versus no, what we're talking about here is the reason why it's not a question on it's alamai skin to mafsik truma. There's a big giant rock in the middle of the roots, and so therefore it can't be nourishing from each other. So the Gemara says, my time with the Rebbe. Why does Rebbe say that's tevel and chulin mixed in? So the Gemara explains, the hadre arve. No, because then the tree becomes one above in its thickness. Even though there's a rock below, it becomes one above in its thickness. My time. So the Gemara says, so what's the argument? Mar savar avira mebalba, Mar savar avira so one is on the position that the avira is mebalba, that even though in the middle of the ground they're like two trees, but since they go above in the airspace, then they become one and they become nourished from each other. And the other position is, no, that if the roots are different, it doesn't matter what they're doing above, that they're going to be separate. So the Gemara now asks a different question. Was it really only 16 amos? What about our Mishnah? That you have to distance the tree from the pit 25 amos, not 16, because otherwise the tree will destroy the well. The tree actually can go, the roots can go more than 16 amos, but it only weakens it, only draws the nourishment up until 16 amos. More than that, it doesn't do it. Rav Dimi came along, he said, indeed, Reish Lakish asked the following question, Rabbi Yochanan, let's say you have a tree that's next to a border, so it's within 16 amos, do you have to bring bikurim from it? So Amar Gazlanu bikurim. So he says that according to this version, Rabbi Yochanan says that tree is a robber, and you don't need to bring bikurim. Kiasa Ravin, Rava said, "Am Rabbi Yochanan echad ion asalach meitzvach nasil ion anota maybe bikura." So he says no. According to Ravin's version, Rabbi Yochanan says, "Your maybe vikora shalmanaz kain inchil Yoshua Yisrael Saaretz." But this was part of the condition that Joshua gave the land to Israel, was that your maybe vikora under these circumstances, you bring the bikurim and you recite it, even if it's within 16 amos of the other person's property. That was a stipulation. So now the next Mishnah says, Ilan shonota with sada chavero. Let's say you have a tree that's leaning into your friend's field. Code say marda agave machrisha. You're allowed to cut it down. Yeah. We go look at the height that when you're standing on your plowing the field, and you lift up your goad to hit the ox, if it will be interfering with those branches, you could cut it down. And by carob tree and a sycamore, which gives excessive shade, kineged mishkalos. We go to the plumb line, meaning you say the property line, and from that point on, you cut the branches that are overhanging you. Beis hashlachin, let's say it's a field of irrigation, kol ha'ilon kineged mishkalos. The whole tree goes to the plot line, and then you could cut it down. Abba Shalom or kol ilon srak kineged mishkalos. Abba Shalom says every barren tree is to the plumb line. So the Gemara says this statement of Abba Shalom, this last statement, what's it referring to? Is Abba Shalom referring to the first clause or the last clause? When Abba Shalom says every barren tree goes to the plumb line, which part of the Mishnah is he referring to? Is he referring to the fact that he says that in a that the Reisha says every tree it's to the Mula Marda, Gabe Macharisha, to the part where you pick up the goad. But by a carob and a sycamore, it goes to the plumb line. And Abba Shol says no, not only a carob and a sycamore, but every barren tree. Whereas the Seifa, the other way to read it is that the Seifa says that in an irrigated field, every tree goes to the plumb line, and Abba Shol says no, only every barren tree goes to the plumb line. So Ibayalu Abashol Aresha Kaya or Seifa Kaya. Is he referring to the first cause or to the last cause? Tashma, the Gemara says the Tanya Beis Shlachin by a irrigated field. Abashol says Koa Ilan Kineged Mishkalos. Every tree goes to the plumb line. Because the shadows, the shade that it gives, is bad for irrigated field. So we see from here, it says in the Brisa that Abba Shol says that every tree goes to the plumb line because in the Beis Hashlachin. Shema Mina, that we see from here, Arei Shekai. So we see from here, Abba Shol says that Abba Shol is referring to the first cause, because according to this Brisa, he's saying that not just the barren tree, but every tree in the Beis Hashlachin goes to the plumb line. So Amar Rav Ashi Masnisa Nami Dek, indeed we could infer this from our Mishnah, the Katani Kol Ilan Srak, because he says every barren tree. Now Iyamar Bishlama, if you want to say Arei Shekai refers to the first cause, I knew the Katani Kol Ilan. That's why he says that's why it says in the first cause every tree, and he says that's what he says Kol Ilan Srak, every barren tree, because the first cause it said the carob and the sycamore. Eliyamar says Seifakai, Elon struck me, by the way, if he was just referring to the second cause, and he would just say a barren tree, because the second cause that said, and the second cause it says Elon Kineged Mishkos, and he would just be saying the carob tree, the barren trees. We see that he's referring to the first cause. So now we say Ilan Chunota or Shasaram, says the Mishnah. Let's say you have a tree that goes into the public domain. You cut it down to allow the space for a camel rider to pass by, a camel to pass by with its rider. Rabbi Yehuda says Gamal Tom Pushkin or Chavilis Muras. You cut it down to allow a camel to pass by with its load of flax or branches. Rabbi Shimon says, "Kol ha'ilon keneged hamishkos mipnei hatumah." You cut down. Rabbi Shimon says, the entire barren, the entire branches opposite the plumb line. Hold on 1 second. So the Gemara says, "Man Tana de benizikin bus or umdina dahashta azlinan." Who is the one? Who's the Tana that says that when it comes to damages, we follow an evaluation of what it is now? Look at the Rashi's explanation, because it says you cut down from the branches so that the camel can pass with its rider, but they're going to grow again. So we don't look at it. We don't look at what's going to be in the future. We look at it to evaluate what it is now. So who's the one who says that we just look at what it is now? We don't make you cut down the whole tree. So it says Amar Shlakish ben Machokas Shenuya. This is actually a dispute. And it's Rabbi Eliezer here. And our mission is like Rabbi Eliezer. It's not because we learned in the Mishnah in Bava Basra, it says, Ein, excuse me, the Tanan Hasam, we learned in the Mishnah in Bava Basra that it says, Ein Osin Chalal Tachatz Rosh Hashanah Bar Shichon Ma'oros. So you're not allowed to make a pit in the public domain or a cavity or ditches. Rabbi Eliezer allows you to do it if you cover it up, if it's so strong enough that a wagon carrying stones can go over it, even though in the end it's going to presumably rot and you'll need to replace it. So even though in the end there'll be a damage, Rabbi Eliezer allows it. So we see from here our Mishnah, which says you can leave something up, make a temporary fix, even though you're going to have to make a future fix. That's like Rabbi Eliezer. Rabbi Yochanan says, I disagree with Reish Lakish because I say, afilu tema Rabbanan. You could even say our Mishnah is like the Rabbanan. Why? Hasam, in the case of the wagon, zimnim de mafches v'lavadaite, the case where he makes the ditch and he covers it up with a wood cover, sometimes it'll rot away and won't know. But in our case over here, every branch, then it comes to grow, we'll clearly see it, and he'll cut it down, and he'll keep it. He'll keep it neat and tidy. Rabbi Yehuda says a camel carrying flax or bundles of branches. So the Gemara asks the question: Shiura de Rabbi Yehuda nafesh, Odelma Shiura de Rabbana nafesh. Who has a greater? Who's giving you more space? Rabbi Yehuda, who says that it's the camel rider with the camel and its rider, or the position of the Rabbanan, the position of the Rabbanan who say a camel with its rider, or the position of Rabbi Yehuda who says the camel carrying the flax or the bundles. Who is giving you? Who says you need more space? Gemara says, well, Pshita, it's obvious the Shir the Rabbanan nafesh, the rabbi's position, which is the camel and its rider, is obviously greater. Because you want to say Rabbi Yehuda is giving you more space, that's a greater amount. Well, if that would be the case, Rabbanan b'shir de Rabbi Yehuda hechiyavdi. So what would the Rabbanan do with the amount of Rabbi Yehuda? I mean, say when the camel with flax is coming, how would it be able to pass by? How would the rabbis anticipate that rider is able to pass by? Meaning to say, if a person will need to pass by with his camel and his flax, how will he be able to do it? So it must be that the Rabbanan are giving you more space than Rabbi Yehuda. So Gemara says, well, that doesn't make sense because the opposite way, so the size of the rabbis is greater. Rabbi Yehuda b'shira de Rabbanan ma'ava. What are the Rabbi Yehudas going to do with the amount of the Rabbanan? Meaning, say, if the guy is driving the camel with his bundles, how's he going to get by? Now, the Gemara says, no, according to Rabbi Yehuda, he anticipates that he could crouch down. It'll just be the size of, for that small pass, it'll just be the size of the bundles, and he'll put himself down and be able to pass by. So the Gemara says, Rabbi Shimon Omer Koa Ilan Kineged HaMishkalos Mimnei HaTumah. Rabbi Shimon says the whole tree corresponds to the plumb line on account of the tumah. What kind of tumah are we talking about? Tana Mimnei Oal HaTumah, because we're worried about what's called ten tumah, that the tree will overhang into the street. and there will be a dead body underneath there, and a Kohen passes by under the tree, and then he'll be also considered to be under the tent tumah. Anything that's going to transmit tumas he'll become tummy as a result. So the pshita, and they had tumah tonight. Well, it's obvious. It says on account of the tumah. Umar says no. Even Masnitzim was just basing on our Mishnah. Avamina might have thought tumah might say orev tumah v'shadi hasim. I might have thought no. Maybe a bird will bring a tumah, like a small piece of dead body, and throw it there. And it'll been sufficient to just trim back the branches a little bit so you could see that there's space enough and there's no dead body hiding there. Kamash Malon, we don't say that it's on account of Tumas OL. And so therefore, you mean to say, even if the Tumah will be in the ground and not above the tree, nevertheless, we're going to have a concern of Tumas OL. Hadran Allah Yachor, return to you Yachor, and God willing, the next stop we start perhaps the longest chapter in Shas called Cheskas Abatim, and beautiful parak, but we'll stop here. Shkoyach.